Drammen and in Agder in Norway. We are now one of the largest energy companies in Norway, with the whole from production of electric power to delivering electric power and selling electric power. So there's a lot going on in our company. I've been there for 1 year now, but have worked as a consultant for the 3 years before that. And earlier my competency has been as a systems administrator for 18 years prior to that, working mostly and mainly with standard on-prem solutions. Transitioned to Azure 5 years ago. I have been working a lot with code, infrastructure as code in Azure, and Azure Policy is one of the things I have been working with. Probably most of you know a little bit about what Azure Policy is, but just to have a high view of what it is. In Azure, we have something called the Azure Resource Manager, which is the broker, if you could call it, that for each and every operation you do, creating resources, updating resources, and whatever in Azure, whatever interface you're using, if it's the portal, if you're using CLI or whatever it is, the Azure Resource Manager will always handle the request and deploy the resources based on that. Azure Policy is then a policy engine that's a part of the Azure Resource Manager. So when you create Azure policies, your policies will always be evaluated for whatever reason and whatever tooling that your users will have. So you can almost look at an Azure policy as a firewall rule, if you would like to view it from the old perspective, where you need to comply with the rule to be able to deploy the solution. So that's a high view of Azure Policy. Azure Blueprints is something that Microsoft also have had a focus on earlier, but not that much. I'm not sure if it ever got out of pure preview features. So Azure Blueprints is nothing I have worked with. Yeah. So also, when we talk about Azure policies, there are some key concepts that we need to know about. Policy definitions is one of the important ones. And a policy definition is where you actually create your rule on what is going to happen. And it's based on two main parts. It's the condition of when this policy is going to apply, and what effects you will have if the policy applies to the operation. And the effects could be numerous. I have listed some of them here. There are also some new ones in preview right now. But it is mainly based on three big parts. It's auditing. That means that you are just auditing your environment and looking at how are your resources today in compliance with your policies. And this does not do any changes. It just audits your environment. And when you create new policies, it's recommended to do an audit first, to just look at what will this policy have of effect, and after that you can go over and do a deny or whatever. Then you have effects that actually stop people from doing what they need, deny, for example, or you could have also modify, where actually you modify the request on behalf of the user, and this happens in line when you try to create or update a resource. You also have this interesting effect called deploy if not exists. I will go back again. Deploy if not exists, where actually you can, after the fact, when a resource has been created, you can additionally deploy either properties into that solution or different resources based on the policy. So policy definitions, incredibly important, and there are both built-in policies and the built-in policy in Azure. They are enormous. There are a lot of policies available already built in by Microsoft. And then you can create your own custom-made definitions. So you can write your own policies from the start. In my example, I will show afterwards, it's a mixed combination. Then you have an initiative. An initiative is a policy set. It just means that it's a collection of policies, so that it's more easy to collect your policies into an initiative and then assign the whole initiative to your scope. And the initiatives can have a mix of both custom and built-in policies into the same initiative. That's quite okay. Then we have assignments. You can create the policy definitions. It will have a scope in the policy hierarchy, but it will not do anything until you assign it to a scope. You can assign the same policy definitions to multiple scopes or just to one. And if you use a management hierarchy, the policy will be inherited automatically by all the underlying resources. Okay. Also, when you do assignments, if you have assigned it to a higher level scope and you would like to exclude some of the subscopes, it might be that you assign it to a management group and you would like to exclude a certain subscription or a management group lower in the hierarchy. You can do that in the assignments, so that you can assign a policy on a high level in your hierarchy, and then you can have exclusions below. But how you architect that is dependent on your environment. And then we have the remediation part. And remediation is when you create a policy and deploy it into an already existing environment. The policy will not do any changes on existing objects that you have there. They will apply if there are changes happening on the object, because then it will be evaluated once more. But if you have a resource that has been deployed and it's not touched, it's not changed in any way, then even if you assign the policy, nothing will happen. But you can force that change by doing a remediation, where you actually do the remediation afterwards and put the resources back into compliance. So these topics are a bit important. You need to know about this and how they fit together. I will do a demo. Everybody loves demos. I hate PowerPoint myself, so I will be quick. In my demo, this is a high level view of what the setup looks like. I hope everybody has seen, I'm not sure if I can get a pen here. Yeah, I don't know. On the top level, you see a management group. In Azure, you have management groups where you can place resources. So at the top, in every tenant, there is a root management group. Beneath that, it's recommended to create a high-level management group that's not the root one, but a company. And it has something to do with how the service principals and the user-assigned identities need access into your environment. You could put it on the root, but often you don't want that. So you create a hierarchy of management groups. And a management group is just a bucket, a container where you put your subscriptions. In large environments like at Å, we might have 100 or 200 subscriptions, and we need to sort them into different management groups so we can manage them a little bit differently. This is also a part of the Azure landing zone principle that Microsoft has, and that we also are using in our environment. So in this setup, it's quite easy. It's my own personal lab. So we have the root, we have a company management group, and then I have a production and a sandbox. Very often you will have a production management group where you have all your production resources, and a sandbox where you can play around as you would like. And you might need to have different policy assignments and sets here. I'm using Azure DevOps as my tool for deploying policies. So in Azure DevOps, we have an Azure repo and I have a pipeline. The pipeline is connected to a service principal in Azure AD, and that service principles have certain RBAC permissions on a level. And here I have given them on the company management level group, just so that I can deploy the necessary policies. On the left side, we also have the Azure Policy assignment. It's just to present. And I have created a user-assigned managed identity, because when we do, for example, deploy if not exists, the deployment will happen under an identity. Earlier, you needed to use system managed identities where each and every initiative had its own, and that was not very, every assignment had its own assigned managed identity. But now you can use user assigned managed identities, and then you can give that the necessary permissions on the RBAC levels. There is a user managed identity in my environment that the policies will use when they do the remediation or the deployment in line. And then I have two subscriptions within the management groups and the resource groups below that. So that's the main setup. And it is important to know that an assignment can be done on every level. So an assignment can be done towards a management group, towards a subscription, towards a resource group, or even to individual resources. But when you have an assignment on a certain level, every resource below that will inherit that policy. Yeah, there are a couple of resources I have linked to. Microsoft Learn, for example, the documentation there is very good on this. And the acadvertiser.net is just a website where you can find enormous amount of information about the built-in policies that Microsoft has and the RBAC roles and so forth. Okay, so with that, I will then go on to the demo. I will start here. Here you see what I meant in the slide on how the management groups are hierarchied in our solution. The root group, the company, production, and so forth. So this is the main setup of this. And in your environment, it might be tons and tons of more of subscriptions. But you have your own way of creating that hierarchy. Then we have policy. So Azure Policy, you can just search for it in, and you will get into the policy. And here you have the different elements that I was talking about earlier, with the definitions, the assignments, exemptions, and remediation. So we will now be looking at the definitions. I have already prepared a little bit. So here, okay, the portal is a little bit slow. It was that yesterday also. I'm sure if, come on. Here we are. So in the portal, there are a lot of built-in policies. So you can scroll here and look at all of them if you would like to. There are a lot of them. When I create my own policies, I often make them of type custom. So these will be listed on top if you have created your own policies or initiatives. In this view, there is a mixed bag of initiatives and policies. You will see what kind of type it is on the right side. And when it's an initiative, it will tell you how many policies do you have within. So for example, in this case, it's company compliance, just a small set of policies that I have added into this, where all of them are built-in versions. For example, here, allowed locations, one of the policies that a lot of people use, where you can tell your environment which regions are you allowed to deploy your resources into. Here also secure transfer to storage account should be enabled, so you can but this is set into this has an audit, or this is not the effect type in the assignment, this is just the initiative. Okay, so we have come on, why there. So I have a set of initiatives here, and here I have my own custom policy that I wrote, I actually found it via the Azure Landing Zone, and I have just tweaked it a little bit. Come on, and this is just adding into your subscriptions. You would like to have the security contacts as a part of that, so that when you have Microsoft Defender for Cloud enabled on your subscriptions, you would like to receive alerts on security incidents and so forth. So then you can register an email address there that will receive all of those. It's one of the features that we use in our SOC team, for example. They would like to receive an email also alert on things that are happening. So that's a custom-made policy, a part of the company Defender for Cloud initiative. So those are the definitions. We have assignments. This is where I assign the initiative or the policy initiative. I'm only assigning that now, and into which scope. And the scope is what we have here. So company management group is the high-level one for me, so I will be assigning it into, I have assigned it into that. And when we do the company compliance here, for example, when you do the assignment, this is where you add the parameter value of what you would like for allowed locations to be. For example, here, West Europe, Norway East, Norway West, Sweden Central, Global, and Europe. Those are the regions I would like for my users to be able to deploy, nowhere else. And this I would like to be just for the production environment. In the sandbox, you can play around in whatever region you would like. I am assigning on the high level, so the sandbox will also, by default, receive this assignment. But here I have also added an exemption. I'll just look here, like that. So here I have added a policy exemption that the company compliance is, I have a waiver on that, so that in the sandbox environment, even though it's in the hierarchy of not being allowed to deploy to any other regions, I can deploy whatever I want into whatever region in the sandbox environment. So that's how those are kept together. And then in remediation, we were talking about that. When you have deployed a policy, the policy engine will start and evaluate all the resources. And after a while, it depends on how large your environment is and how many policies you have. You will, after a little while, you will get a compliance on are your resources in compliance with the policy that you have applied. And here in the remediation part, I can see that I have policies that will go up once more. I will look in this context. Here I can see that Microsoft Defender for Cloud Security contacts haven't been applied to subscription because I put that into the policy was assigned after the fact that I had those two subscriptions. So if I go into these two subscriptions, I will see that when it loads here, I will see that these two subscriptions do not have this set. So I can just do a remediation. I need to have permissions for this then, and this will kick off and use the managed identity to actually then deploy this setting into the subscriptions. So if I go back here, I can look at Microsoft Defender for Cloud and environment settings. Come on. And here I can look at the Hjortland, for example. And we can see that under email notifications, I'm not sure if the policy already has applied here. Yeah, now it has applied. So here it put in the email address for a different email that should be a recipient for these notifications. So if we go back again to that remediation, I will do a refresh. Probably it will say here that it has completed. No, it's in progress. But we will have that into the subscription. That's just one easy part of doing the remediation. Okay. Then we can look at the code. I am using Bicep. I love Bicep. It's a very good language. I have been working with ARM templates earlier, and for those of you that have, it's difficult. It's not very user-friendly or developer-friendly or whatever you would call it. But Bicep is to a very high degree. I will share this test here for you in my GitHub repo. I will put a link afterwards. I haven't uploaded it right yet, but I will do that and give you a link so you can look at it if you would like to use this as a starting point. I have here a set of modules for those who have been working with Bicep. You have the concept of modules and you have the concept of resources. So I have a set of modules that I use very frequently in my policies. For example, creating management group exemptions. I'm having a target scope of the management group, and instead of writing this every single time, I can just call this and put in the necessary parameters, and I can call it multiple times on what the exemptions should be, or the role assignments if I would like to do role assignments. Here I have also a couple of folders where I have just the built-in policy IDs in Azure. For the ones that I'm using, I have just created a simple JSON key value pair on this is the name of the policy in Azure, and this is the ID of it. So I don't need to reference the ID in my code. I can just reference the name of the policy. I have also in the built-in roles, for example, if you are have an owner RBAC role, I can have that just this is the unique identifier for the RBAC role in Azure. So when I write my code, I don't need to remember what the role definition value should be. I can just say it's an owner. So I load these files into my Bicep code when I do the assignment. I have one main Bicep file. And here I will run. That was not the one I would like to show, my main Bicep file. If I go down here at the bottom, you can see that, for example, when I want a role, I can just add a dot here, and then it will list the ones that I have read from the file. So if I would like for it to be a security admin, I can do that. If I would like to give it an owner membership, I can do that. So then it will assign just the correct one. And this is one of the nice features of using Bicep instead of using ARM templates. Okay. Do any changes on this right now. So the setup here is pretty simple. I'm using YAML pipelines in Azure. So I have just a YAML pipeline where I do an AC deployment management group create. And then I just tell it which management group do I want to deploy this to. And I just reference the Bicep file and a parameter file. So I have one main Bicep file running with parameters that are fetched from a parameters file. For example, here we have the list of allowed location: West Europe, Norway, East, Norway, West, and so forth. And if I here would like to add North Europe, for example, I could do this. North Europe, add this, save it. And then I can, in this environment, I don't have the complete pull request approval stages, but that you could also do. But here I could added North Europe as an allowed location, for example, commit and a sync. And this will automatically just kick off in this setup. If it will automatically just kick off the pipeline, and it will start to deploy this change into the environment. So we have one main bicep file where I have my parameters. I have some variables, and the variables is the built-in roles, for example, because I'm using that to assign permissions. I have resources, and here it's modules. So I'm creating initiatives. And since these are policy dependent, I cannot have these in my library of modules. I create them within this initiative folder. So I have the initiatives telling me how would I like for this initiative to be built up, which policies should be a part of it. And I also have on the assignment page. One very nifty feature that you cannot do when you create policies manually in the portal is that you can add here something called non-compliance messages. And this is a really cool toy. So here I've logged into my environment, and I'm going to try and create a storage account in my production subscription. And when I do that, here, East US is the location, and that's not a part of the allowed location. So if I try to do that, I will receive an error message from the Azure Resource Manager that this is not allowed. Resource that I tried to create was disallowed by policy. And here you see the reason. And the reason is actually the message that I have created on what would I like to inform my users are the message for why you aren't allowed to do that. And here you can be quite creative on entering contact information, for example, if they need to contact the platform team to allow for this or whatever, you can deploy that. Here I am also then in this saying what kind of assignment is disallowing this. And I have also put in the list of allowed location as a parameter so that when I change the allowed list, the response out to the user will also change. So for this, you see that North Europe has actually been deployed already. So North Europe is now an allowed part of this, but the region I have chosen is not. And here you can have different, even though you collect multiple policies into an assignment initiative, you say that, okay, this message should be sent when you hit a certain policy, and this should be hit when you hit a different policy. So this is how I have architected the code, keeping each initiative within its own folder and using that for deploying the resources. So if we go back again here, we probably will see it was the compliance policy that we did, added North Europe as an allowed location, and it did that. I will also go back and do one thing. I will show you. I also have a policy here that on where are we here? Azure Monitor. I have said that when we deploy a Key Vault, we will automatically be deploying the diagnostic settings for the Key Vaults. In our environment at Å Energi, we have a very large Sentinel installation where we are collecting data from all our resources. And we would like for this setup to be automatic, that when a user is creating a Key Vault, it will automatically put in a diagnostic setting that sends the diagnostic logs to the Sentinel workspace so that it can be analyzed by our Sentinel analytics rules. So here I just created a small policy that will create the diagnostic settings on the key vaults after they have been deployed. So a user can deploy a key vault, and if he doesn't put in the diagnostic settings, or even if he does, we will deploy an additional diagnostic settings so that we know we will get those diagnostic logs to our Sentinel workspace. So here we have as an input the log analytics workspace that we would like to send it to. And I also have here, this could have been concatenated, but here I also have the subscription ID and the log analytics, because when we are redeeming this or deploying that diagnostic setting, we need to do it via an identity. And that's where I'm using the managed identity in Azure. So we have this ID Azure Policy. It's a managed identity in Azure, and this has been given permissions to do these changes in the environment. So if we look at this key vault, I created that yesterday. We can look at the activity log. We will look last 24 hours. And then we can expand that. No, why didn't I see that? Okay, I don't see the name, but here create update resource diagnostic settings was started yesterday, and it was done by the managed identity. So we know that it was that deployed that resource. So if we see here, Azure Sentinel set by policy, we are sending the logs to the default analytics workspace. In this case, if you have one centrally, you will of course just send it there. And what kind of logs are we sending? And it's the audit logs and Azure Policy details. So that's one way of doing this policy assignment and the remediation. Time is flying, 11:38. We have 7 minutes. Very, very, very rapid introduction into how you can do this by utilizing Bicep. It's a very nice language. So I think we will open up for questions.
Perfect. Thank you, Jonny. We have some questions coming in here, so maybe I can just bring them up as they come by. Starting with Martin, maybe you would just unmute and ask your question yourself.
Yes, I can. Was wondering if you have actually created a custom Azure RBAC role for your pipeline, or if you're running with an owner of the management group or something like that.
Not running with an owner. You need to use a special RBAC there called, I will just find it here, 2 seconds, management groups. There is, because you cannot deploy policies even if you are an owner. It's not possible. You need to have a different RBAC role called, and I will find it here, 2 seconds. It's called Resource Policy Contributor. So you give the pipeline the resource policy contributor right to be able to write this into the environment. Since I'm also using the same pipeline in this setup, also for setting RBAC permissions for the user managed identity, you could do that in a different pipeline. I also have the user access administrator set for that pipeline. But it is the resource policy contributor that you actually need to give it, and you do not give it the owner permission. Yep.
Okay. Thanks.
Great. Bastian, you had a question. You can take it yourself, maybe also.
Yeah. So I recently started working really with policy, and of course we do the deploy if not exist stuff. But do you have any experience where if I want to unassign a policy and want to remove those configurations that are added with the policy? Are there any tricks there?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
The effect is deploy if not exists. So there is no remove there. You can remove the assignment so that the policy is not in effect. But if it has deployed or set anything, then you would actually need to remove it manually. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's what I was afraid of.
Yeah, especially with deploy if not exist, because that actually sends an ARM deployment into your environment. So that it just runs and deploys. So then you would need to do the same procedure as you would if you did any other deployment. And you need to clean that up manually. Yeah.
So are you then using a lot of append or?
No, mostly deploy if not exists. Modify, audit, deny. Those are the effects we are using mostly. But I also see that the new, what is it called? There is a new variant now where you also can deploy, for example, that you aren't allowed to delete running the delete operation on your resources. So that you can actually assign a policy into a management group where delete actions are not allowed beneath it. That's one of the preview mechanisms. That would probably also be one that we would like to utilize when it's out of the preview, so that we can centrally control what resources aren't allowed to be deleted. Deny action, yeah, that's correct. That's the effect.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yep.
Good presentation, by the way.
Hopefully it was an introduction. 45 minutes is not much time, so it's a speed run, but hopefully you got the high level.
It was real good.
And just some tips on how you can use it. Tweak it as you would like.
Perfect, Jonny. I see there are no more questions waiting. There's some great feedback. People love the session, so that's a big heart for me for that. There was a little hand up here, but it was removed again, I think. So let's just stop the recording, and if anyone wants to raise their hand or unmute, we can keep it going a few more minutes.